okay, which will be in the January when you come back after the summer after the Christmas break. So you will be thinking about that, and you need to be doing revision, lots therein. And sites like the elearneconomics.com website have got an awful lot of questions that you can be practicing your way through. All right, so please do be working on that. And obviously there's also the Teachify Me website, which has all the past papers and the mark schemes and the like as well. So my suggestion, okay, is that you do it a question at a time. Okay, so your multiple choices I've been setting for you, I've been talking to you about 10 questions at a time, so that you're not massively trying to do all 30 questions. Do 10 at a time, check how you're going. If there are ones in there that you think, oh heck, what does this mean? Try and figure them out, ask, email, etc., as some of you have been doing, which is really good. The short response questions, same, right? When you look through the paper too, and you practice questions, just do like a section. Don't try and do a whole paper, right? Just do a section at a time. That's more time efficient for you, okay? As you build towards, obviously you've got Christmas break and all of that, but as you build towards the actual mock, then yes, start doing more parts, but make it manageable for you, because you've got all your sciences and your maths and everything else that you are doing as well. So try and make it manageable. And my best recommendation is bite-sized chunks, okay? And I know this week, I'm going to be seeing some parents of yours, okay? And, you know, that will be something that I will be saying is bite-sized chunks, right? Just work on sections that you know are your weaker areas, okay? Because you've done that, all right? And prepare it. So, and then it's, okay, I'm not so sure on this section, so I need to do more revision and prep on that section. And send me questions, right? Which some of you have been doing, which has been very good, right? So if you're not sure, what does this mean? How did I apply this? This is what the mark scheme said. What does this mean? Right? Send it through. I will help you, okay? Absolutely happy to. I mean, if we need to, we can do a meet, all right, and go through things. Now, ideally, we would have had as we'd talked about, having a weekend workshop, but I don't know that that's going to work, obviously, because we're not at school, okay? I mean, whether we can, if you're wanting to do an extra meet, you know, we could possibly look at doing an extra meet at some point and go through another paper, okay? Now, with that being said, I've put 2 Nearpod links in. All right, so if you wouldn't mind, now I've labeled them. So I've got Nearpod 1 and Nearpod 2. So if you could jump into Nearpod 1, all right, now Nearpod 1, if I open up the window like this. Nearpod 1 should be this one, A9ET4. A9ET4. This is the one that you worked on the other week. I just want to go back through a little bit of it. So if you could jump into A9ET4, which is Nearpod code 1. I apologize for having 2 codes, but we're actually going to start or do an introduction to a new topic today. Once we get around to it. All right, A9ET4. Jump into that one. Be good. Right, and we seem to be all there, which is good. Fantastic. Okay. Now, these are questions that you were working on before. Now, again, it's things to consider, right, is these sorts of 8-mark ones. So when you're doing your bite-sized work, yes, you can be doing definitions and those sorts of things as well. But when you see these sorts of ones, discuss whether or not the imposition of import tariffs by a country will reduce its unemployment. Apologies for the break in the sentence there. And it's worth 8 marks. That's going to get you 8 marks in the exam. So it's well worth your time practicing that and doing a plan for how you might answer it, then doing a write-up of the actual answer, comparing it with the mark scheme, seeing where the mark scheme said you could have added more depth and more detail, seeing where the mark scheme said these are where the significant theories are that you should have covered. And if you're not sure, then you can always ask, okay? So now with this one, you haven't actually necessarily had a go at, right? So I'd like you to have a go at that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the timer, and we'll give you 12 minutes, and you can have a go on this particular question. Discuss whether or not the imposition of import tariffs by a country will reduce its unemployment. It's a tough question, but a really good one. All right. And you're going to have 12 minutes, and I'd like you to write your answers into the Nearpod, please, so that we can see them. Ready, set. Now, some of you have already got part answers in there. That's okay. You can use those and add to them, develop them. Set. 12 minutes starting now. Have a go. You're on 11 minutes now. Work, keep going. 9 minutes. Okay, so you got just a little bit under 9 minutes. Okay, keep going. Okay, up to just a little bit under 7 minutes now. Not seeing some writing here. All right, seeing some answers coming in. All right, still going. Still no answers to some. 3 minutes, or a little bit under 4. Okay. A little bit less than 3 minutes. Okay, looking good. Right, less than 2 minutes. Counting down. Right, you've got about 40 seconds. $30. 20. And stop. Stop. How do I stop it? Stop. All right. Now, in the exam, that's about the length of time that you're going to have. Okay. You might be able to steal an extra minute or two, but that's about it. All right. So we need to make sure that you are getting up to that speed. Okay. Now, there are a number of you who need to practice on your time management with regards to writing your answers. Okay. Now, when you look at the question, okay, it's discuss it's whether or not, so you know right away that it's got to be a balanced argument. So you're going to have to say, in this case it is, but in this case it isn't. Right? And because there are 8 marks and it's a balanced argument, you are going to be looking at potentially 4 marks for yes and 4 marks for no, more or less. A little bit rough, but around there. Imposition of import tariffs. So there's your key term. So you would be highlighting that. So in the exam, you might want to underline or highlight the key term in the paper. By a country will reduce its unemployment, and then again highlight that. So when you're writing, all right, writing, typing, then you look up, am I answering the question? Am I answering the question? Okay, each time, all right, just to make absolutely certain that that's what you are doing. So you will be starting with definitions quite clearly. You're going to be defining import tariffs. You can also define unemployment. That would be a useful thing to do. You're going to be talking about how import tariffs affect imports and then therefore affect consumption choices, affecting production if they're raw materials. You will be talking about the idea about the jobs, the employment of people who import the products, okay? Also the people who, in comparison with people whose jobs are competing, excuse me, their products are competing, just getting a whole bunch of emails from people, competing with these particular people, all right? Okay. Now, lots of people want to know how well the World Economics Cup learners did in the competition. So I'm getting lots of emails congratulating all the World Economics Cup learners, but also saying, how well did they do? How well did they do? The answer is we don't know yet. Yes, good. That's a little light, Farah. Good. Yes. Very good. All right, so that's a really good answer from Zitong. I can't share that somehow. I can share that. I can't. Yep, so we'd want to define tariffs firstly. Yeah, okay, so that's the idea. All right, you haven't got much of the might not. Good, Young Wai. Yeah, good. All right, so we got some good answers coming through, so that's really good to see. Okay, now remember in the exam, that's the time roughly you're going to have. All right, so you need to have read the question, made a plan, all right, and then written an answer all within that time period. Good work, Delta. Yeah, good. Okay. Now, one of the things I'm not sure about yet, and we'll have a look at the mark scheme and see, it does say by a country. So whether including a case study, an example might be, it's always useful, I think. So you could easily talk about, say, the American aluminium tariffs, or have you seen the new one, the China having a tariff on wine, Australian wine? They put like a 121% tariff on Australian wine. There's a massive trade, battle, basically, war starting between Australia and China at the moment. Really, it's hasn't been particularly pleasant so far. But that was the latest round, was this tariff on wine. Yeah, remember you've got to constantly refer back to unemployment. All right, that's the main focus of the question, is about unemployment. So every section of work that you do, every paragraph answer, every point has to say how it will impact on unemployment. Will it increase unemployment or will it decrease unemployment? Every single section. Right. Good ammo. Yeah, a little light ammo, and you need the other side as well. And finished it. Yeah, you haven't finished your answer, Amy. That's good, Liz. Keep it up. Not have a delta today. Yeah, remember to use the word unemployment in your answer. Always. All right, now, there were lots of other questions, but I just want to have a look at this. All right, so if you have a look here, import tariffs raise the price of imports, demand for imports fall, consumers switch to domestic products, firms increase output, they might take on more workers. So that's is decreasing unemployment. All right. Tariffs protecting infant industries, allowing them to grow, employing more workers, reducing unemployment. Tariffs protecting declining industries, decreasing unemployment. Tax revenue increasing, so more government spending, and as a result of that, that could lead to reduced unemployment. Not sure that you would get to that point, right? But you definitely could get all of those. Other countries may retaliate, imposing tariffs, and therefore employment in export industries may fall. So that's a counter argument, so point and counterpoint. Tariffs on imported raw materials will increase the cost of production. Higher domestic prices of products causing a fall in demand, therefore fall in employment. All right, so that again is a counterpoint. Imports may not have domestic substitutes. All right, so therefore the price of imports may be lower, so consumers may still buy them. All right. Demand for imports may be price inelastic, so therefore it won't have any particular effect on unemployment at all. All right, now that's good. Good work. Now what I want us to do, team, is now to jump, and I apologize, this is going to be a bit disconcerting for you, but to jump from there to here, which is nearpod number 2, and it is J4YS7. J4YS7 is the code, and this will be our new topic. It is in the classroom. It is listed as Nearpod 2. J4YS7. I've just remembered that was the name of the kid in Thailand. His name was Jay. I was trying to remember his name the other week. I got asked, I told a wee story about some of the kids in Thailand and how awesome some of them were. And this particular one ended up being in the basketball team, and he was fantastic and all of that, but I couldn't remember his name. I've just remembered now his name was Jay. Right, so into Nearpod 2, please. Into Nearpod 2. Now, I understand that there's problems at the boarding house with the internet, so boarders may not be able to access the internet for a period of time. I don't know if that's been fixed yet, but that was the email that went round a little while ago. That might explain why we don't seem to have a delta. I don't know. Right, slowly dribbling in. Right, so our new topic is, well, it's not technically called economic development. It kind of is, but it kind of isn't. All right, I'm calling it economic development. It's about 3 or 4 different subunits that I'm putting all together into one and calling it economic development. Okay, so we start off fairly straightforward, fairly small. We look at some key terms with regards to economic development, and then we're going to move on, from there. Okay. I will add these slides to the classroom. I didn't manage to remember to do that. I shall do that so that you have these as well. We're not going to go through all of this material, right? We don't need to, but we're going to go through a little bit of it because that will be helpful to us. All right, we've got another couple of lessons, obviously next week and then the week after. Yes, the week after that. And then you'll be off for Christmas. So we need to just try and plan it so that we can get through the work, but also have enough revision time that we're able to do lots of revision in the lead up to your mock exams. But please do not rely on doing revision in class. Right? That's important, yes, absolutely. But the work you put in, right, is going to pay off dividends later. So the more you do, the better your results will be. All right, economic development. So firstly, what do you think economic development is all about? Where you go. See if you can answer that one. I'll give you about 30 odd seconds. I want this to be you. I don't want you to be finding this from Dr. Google. This is just you. This is just your thoughts at this point. This is like a pre-learn sort of idea. What do you think it means? Answer here. It's a good one. Yeah, TMK. Some ideas in. Okay, good work on why. Like that, Farah. Okay. Good. All right, about another 30 seconds so we can try and get Liz and the rest involved. Come on, Nico. Have a go. Come on, Zarfan. You can do it. No Dr. Google answers, just your personal thoughts at this point. Good. Okay. All right. Well, Delta is here, but I don't know if the internet is working for you, Delta. Okay. So what is economic development all about? All right. So here's what we're going to be doing. Some parts of the subunit, right? Just kind of listed there for you. So we're going to be looking at indicators of living standards. Okay, we're going to be comparing them. Don't worry about what the terms mean yet. We're going to cover these in time. Right? Definitions about poverty, causes of poverty, policies to fix poverty, population factors, effects of changes in population, and differences in economic development in different countries. Right? So those are the sorts of things that we're going to be thinking about. Now, quite clearly, if we've got definitions and causes, they're the lower level skills, the comparisons, the effects of, and the differences in, they're going to be the slightly higher level skills that are going to require a bit of explanation. So you might remember all the way back to macroeconomics, which I know was a little wee while ago now. And one of the terms that we used in macroeconomics was GDP, or gross domestic product. All right, code being GDP. Now we use that to explain this idea of economic growth. Okay, and we talked about how GDP, or gross domestic product, if it was to increase in value, particularly if it was adjusted for inflation, so what we call real GDP, if real GDP was to increase, then we would expect to be seeing economic growth, our economy growing. What GDP worked out to be was the total monetary or market value of all of the finished products that are produced within your country's borders, usually within a year, right? And we calculate it on a per quarter basis. So at the moment, there's some pretty weird statistics for GDP that are going around. If you saw, it was, what is it, about a week or so ago, America came out with a GDP figure of an increase by 30%. All right, and that 30% was a quarterly change. So it had increased by 30% in a quarter. And the whole reason why is because it had fallen by so much before then that it was basically just trying to recover some of the ground that it had fallen by. Okay? So economic growth can be positive, but economic growth can be negative. Economic growth is all about how much income, how much money the people in the economy have and what they're able to do with it, what they're able to buy and sell with it. So if this part of the course was just about economic growth, then it'd be the same sorts of concepts and discussions that we would be having with regards to economic growth, right? We'd be trying to work out what causes economic growth, right? We'd be trying to figure out whether economic growth is actually good for a country, but wait, the effect on the environment, all of those sorts of things. Does economic growth benefit everybody in an economy, or is it only some people that get the benefit? So the equity issue. But we're talking about economic development. And so the big point here is to stress, if you will, the difference between these two ideas. Economic growth and economic development, they have a relationship with each other, okay, but they're not the same thing. And it is quite common for people to get the two confused and talk about economic development when they're really talking economic growth, or talk about economic growth when they're really talking economic development, okay? And although the two are quite linked, quite strongly linked, as we're going to see, they're actually two completely different words, two theories, okay? So if I just move on one more. So economic growth is all about seeing an increase in GDP. Now, GDP can decrease, and obviously we've seen that quite a bit. But what we are going to be thinking about more so than GDP is we're going to be discussing a lot, which some of you mentioned, about this idea of living standards. Living standards, right? So the idea of how well you are living, your living standards, your welfare, okay? All right, there is how well you are faring, all right? How well you are going on your journey, right? Fare, journey, right? And well, how well, that's where the word came from, right? Welfare, yeah? So the idea is you've got this standard. Now, standard is a very old-fashioned word for flag, okay? So you would talk about raising the standard, okay, which means raising the flag. And in the old days, as a method of communication, I know this is, not necessarily as interesting to a lot of you, but in the old days, as a method of communication, you used to put like a little mark on the flagpole. And how high the flag went up the flagpole, it meant different things. And we still sometimes use that today, because if the flag only goes halfway, all right, okay, so if we say the flag has risen to half mast, then that indicates that there's been a death, okay? That's like a significant thing. Raise your flags to half mast means that there's been a death. So we still kind of use that today, and it also means something completely different if you hang the flag and it's upside down. There's a whole lot of meaning and symbology with regards to that. And, if you ever watch The Big Bang Theory and Sheldon Cooper's Fun with Flags, you can probably find out even more, all right? So about the shape of the flags and all of that. And Malaysia loves flags. You see flags around here all the time, all right? And there's difference between a flag and a pennant and, all of these sorts of ideas. But what I'm trying to say is that in the old days, we used to use the word standard when we were talking about a flag. Right? Remember, people would charge into battle with the person carrying the flag. Right? They'd go into the war, right? Because you plant the flag, you take the territory, yeah. And that person literally would be called the standard bearer, the person who holds the standard. Right? Nowadays, when we talk about standards, we're talking about a measuring device, a measuring system. Right? So, what are the standards of our living? Right? How high up the measuring table are we with regards to our quality of living? Right? So that's what we're now referring to when we're talking about living standards. Right? We're talking about it's like, say, with my son, he stands against the door frame and we mark off how tall he gets. Okay, he's grown another inch over the last couple of months, which is good. All right. And that's an idea of, again, marking off an increase, okay? And that's the sort of idea that we're talking about. How high up those standards of living can you get? And if you're going to then use that, you can then use it to compare different countries. And you've got just across the border, you've got Singapore. So Singapore and Malaysia, okay? Now, you can look at the difference in standards of living between Singapore and Malaysia, and you can make a comparison between them. And you can talk about which country has a higher standard of living, which country is higher up that demarcation, that marking, all right? And which country is lower. And then you can talk about why and what that means and the implication of it. And you can also talk about what does it take for a country to improve its standard of living, to go up the flagpole, so to speak. All right? What happens if there's a war or a disaster like we're facing at the moment? Maybe the standards of living start to decrease. Okay. Now, when we talk about an increase in real, remember real meant it was adjusted for inflation, we talk about an increase in real GDP, we aren't necessarily saying that that's going to increase our living standards. Even though this is effectively an income for the country, it might increase our living standards, but it equally might not. Okay? Because if we increase real GDP and all of that increase in income goes straight to Zarfan, the rest of us aren't going to get it. Yeah? And when you look around the world today, that's kind of what's been happening. There is a lot of increase in real GDP. Still, even today, in different parts of the world, there is some increase in real GDP, but it's not necessarily getting to everybody. So you can't suggest that that is then raising living standards. But remember, living standards is all about your quality of life. So you might have the income, but just not the quality of life. Yeah? And that's something to consider as well. Okay? So we're also going to discuss what's called other measures, other standards of living indicators that we could use. The two main ones that we're going to be thinking about that are other measures, one is called the HDI. That's a very common one in the United Nations, right? That world organization uses the HDI. Okay, it's called the Human Development Index, and more information about that to follow. But it is because it's used by the United Nations, it tends to be like the go-to statistic, the go-to standard statistic that we use to figure out the standards of living and to do comparisons between countries. Right? There is other ones. There's lots. You can almost have as many different measures as there are people. Okay, so you can talk about things like an index of sustainable economic welfare, or ISO. Right? And we're going to look at that and just see what that is. Right? And you could use that as a different measure to the HDI. Right? And have some thoughts about what that actually, why there's a difference. Right? Okay. All right. Just hearing noises and hoping everything's okay with my son. I think it all is. All right. Now, what are our standards of living? Can you think of any examples of goods or services that could be included in an indicator of our standard of living? So if you say you've got a good standard of living, what is it that you have that will tell other people that you have a good standard of living? Is it your car? Is it your house? What is it that tells other people that you have a good standard of living? All right, so what are our standards of living? Can you think of any examples, goods or services that are included as an indicator of standard of living? Go, 30 seconds. Last thing for this morning. See what numbers we get. No, we get no. Yes. Okay, MK, that's, yeah. That's all right, but I'm actually thinking about more goods and services that could be included, yeah? So things like cars and houses. That's sort of an idea. Yeah, okay. I know that you'd classify your family as a good or a service, but maybe. What is it that you have, all right? So if it helps, do a comparison between Singapore and here. What things might they have in Singapore that would be good if we had them here? Or what things do we have here that they don't have in Singapore? Yeah. Yes, that's good, Joshua. Anything else? Yes, that's good. Keep going. Remember, because we're talking about standards of living, and the goods and services can be anything. They can be they don't have to be big, and they don't have to be general. They can be quite specific. Yes, you're absolutely right, Sitong. However, the question was asking for goods and services. But that is right. Yeah, that's good, Sen. That's good. Still thinking about goods and services. Yeah, Amy, still thinking about goods and services. Yes, good, Delta, but we're wanting actual physical goods and services. What examples? Real goods and services. What can you think of? Waiting on a couple more. Just waiting on an answer from Liz. Yeah, you got the right idea there. You haven't fully answered it because you were supposed to say at the start what your understanding of living standards was. Good. Ja. Another couple of seconds. Okay, so we got some answers. So I'm going to stop the sharing, jump back to the meet. Yeah. All right. Now, was quite interesting, the number of you didn't read the question. Yeah, you're answering that. Okay, so it asked you what your understanding of living standards was. So you start with that, and then it asked you for examples of goods and services with regards that you thought might then be able to be used as indicators of living standards. All right, so the clue is the idea of goods and services. Okay, so yes, you're thinking healthcare, yes, you're thinking education, but can you be a bit more specific, say, about the goods? All right, so cars, houses, yeah, but what about something simple, computers? Does everybody have computers around the world? Yeah, is that an indicator of your living standards, how well off you are, how well you are faring? If you have, I mean, you look around your house, all right, you might have one TV in your house. You might have two TVs in your house. Some of you might have three or more, I don't know. How many computers do you have access to? How many cell phones? These are all goods that you can use as indicators of living standards. Yeah. What about the foods that we eat? Yeah. Is there different types of food that might suggest, yeah, if we have access to like the high quality steak, all right, maybe that's something, yeah, that would indicate living standards. Maybe we don't just have a car, or maybe a car versus a bike. Okay, so if you've been to, well, even around here, the motorbikes, people riding the motorbikes, they don't have a car necessarily, they might drive a motorbike. Yeah. If you were in China, you might not have a motorbike, but you might have a bicycle and ride your bicycle around. Yeah. You might have an e-bike, but that's, that's what we used to see quite a lot in China. Right? But indicators of standard of living, right? Just basic things, like I said, like how many TVs you have in your house, or where is the nearest hospital to you, right? How many doctors are there that you could personally reach? Are there specialists within those services that you have got access to? Right, so the specialist doctors, that you might need. What about the internet as a service? Does everybody have the internet? Does everybody have the same quality of internet? Obviously, at the moment, we're all experiencing sometimes patchy internet, right, depending on where we are. And as I said before, the school apparently lost its internet. So you can use these as real-life, concrete examples of economic development, of living standards. Because what if all of a sudden in an area of Malaysia where they didn't have internet, now they do? We can actually then say that maybe their living standards have improved. I'm going to guess, because there's like the highland areas in Malaysia that, like the Cameron Highlands, and there's other like coastal areas, village areas. Maybe there are areas that don't have the internet, or only have the internet through like phones, as opposed to plugging it into the have a Wi-Fi system. Maybe I don't know. All right, but that could be an example. Yeah. All right. Now, how old were you when you got your first computer? How old were you when you got your first phone? Yeah, all indicators of standard of living. We had a guy who worked with us in Thailand. He was what's called a gap student. I don't know if you know what a gap student is. But what they do is they leave school. They finish their schooling. Right, so he finished his year 13 and then decided, before he went to university, he was then going to volunteer, well, kind of volunteer. They do get paid, but a very small amount, in another school, in an international school in a different country. And that gives them the experience of teaching, working with kids. They get a small pay, but they also get the experience, the different country, the different culture. They travel a bit, all of those sorts of things. And so quite a number of young people in New Zealand as well would have what's called a gap year. So they finish school and then they have a gap year in between schooling and going to university or whatever they do after that. So this is a learner that we had. And so he was a gap student, and he was really interested in business and economics. He'd done it at school, he really enjoyed it. So he came and worked in our department, and I had a lot to do with him, and it was great. And he was brilliant. He was such a help. He designed a whole lot of posters for us. He did one-on-one tutoring with some of the students, which was really helpful. We even got him to take a lesson or two, which was quite interesting, right? Because he wasn't, used to teaching. But he had never, ever in his entire life, he'd gone all the way through school, and he'd never used a computer, ever. So the first time he was using a computer was when he was nearly 20, okay? And he'd never used one before, because where he'd come from, they didn't use it. It was all pen and paper, right? So it was quite a big deal for him to work out how a computer worked, and I don't know if you remember that sort of time when you had to try and figure out, but his standard of living went up. And then all of a sudden, all of these other opportunities, were available to him and where they weren't before. So that's about the standard of living. That's about development, right? We were able to get him a computer so that when he left, he actually took the computer back with him, right? And he took it back to his family, and that was the first computer that their family had ever had. And he was able to pass it on to his younger brother, who was able to use it for his schoolwork. And that was the first time that had happened. It was quite amazing. He's kept in touch over the years with regards to this, and how big an impact this has had on now his whole family and their whole life. So that's what we're talking about. And you, right, where we are now, right, as we're going to discover, is in a part of the world where there is economic development occurring right in front of our eyes. So it is real life examples that we see here that other people in other parts of the world just won't see, yeah? Or they'll have some vague understanding or vague textbook-based idea as to what it all is. You can imagine some of the people in the United States, they've never gone out of their town, right? They're doing IGCSE or the equivalent therein. They're doing a topic about economic development, and there are case studies about countries. They've never heard of the country before. They couldn't identify the country on a map. Right? Remember, 20% of Americans can't find America on a map. Yeah, just putting that out there. Yeah. So how would they understand that? But you have that connection. You've seen and experienced, and you lived through it. Even if you haven't been born in Malaysia, you're here now, and you're seeing it. When I was in New Zealand, it was the same story. I had friends who were born in a city and they stayed in the city, and that's where they are. They're not going anywhere. They don't even have necessarily a passport because they're not going to fly anywhere. They're not leaving the country. So why would they have one? All right. So, you know, one of my friends from the small city I was born in, one of my friends, we invited him to come up and come stay with us in Auckland and come around and have a look around the city, the big city, right, which had 1 million people in it. Woo. Okay. And that was big. That's big for New Zealand. Yeah. And he couldn't. He just said, no, it's too many people. It's too big. It's all too scary. I'll stay where I am. Yeah. So people, you know, there are lots of people who won't have the understanding that you do. And so that's why this topic is something that is personal, perhaps, to you. You can see real life implications of it all around the world, right? But particularly locally where you are. So you're going to be able to use your understanding and put it into your answers. All right. Now, so your tasks for today, obviously, yes, I'm wanting you to review those key understandings that we've looked at, obviously reviewing GDP, etc. But I'm going to want you to do some revision, practice questions, e-learn economics, right? Multiple choice and extended response. I'm going to get you to do some extended response as well, and I'll put those tasks into the classroom. Please email me, as you have been, which has been good, any questions, any worries, any concerns that you have. Otherwise, if you're saying the land of my birth, hey, Kornera, please make sure you have a brain break between now and your next lesson. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you. Nope, still got 3 in. You're right, Delta. I'm going to remove you, Delta, because you haven't left. Okay.